Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this conversation. I'm Margaret Latimer. I'm the Vice President and Provost at the Germantown campus and for the college-wide STEM unit, also a member of RTCAT, the Return to Campus team.
Hi, I'm Kim Kelly. I'm the Provost for the Rockville campus, and I also am responsible for art, accounting, education, business, English, and social sciences. I also want to reiterate that I'm very pleased to be here and thank you for the invitation. I look forward to an informative conversation.
Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I'm Chevelle Glimpf, Director of Public Health and Environmental Safety for the college. I'm excited to be here today and certainly excited to answer any questions that you may have as we engage in getting ready to return everyone to campus. Excited to be here. Thanks.
So I'm going to share the screen and kind of walk you guys through the process. So the first thing we want to tell you is that the link to the Medicat portal will be live tomorrow. Medicat is our third-party vendor where you're going to submit all your documentation. Your medical documentation is not going to be part of your student record. It's going to be housed separately in a more secure manner. All that's going to be fed back to the student record is if you are compliant or not compliant with the requirement. So when you go to Montgomery College's website, if you just click the vaccine requirement, it takes you to this page. So this is what's live now. This is updated. And then as of tomorrow, you're going to see that link is going to be here. So as you know, we're going to, this goes into effect January 7th. So what we have added here, because we wanted it to be clear for students, is we want you to register as early, plan ahead, do everything you need to do. But if for some reason you know of another student who's not going to register before January 7th, they just need to know that if they register after January 7th, one day after registering, they then need to upload their proof of vaccination or their request for exception if they're going to do in person. So looking at these things here, the other important thing is you must be registered for a spring class before you attempt to access the Medicat portal. So if you click on that link and you can't sign in, it's because the system doesn't recognize you because you're not registered for in-person. And that takes the business day, which is why we're saying if you register the next day. If you're already registered, we're already feeding information over. So some of the questions were about testing. So you can see here, there's the link to testing weekly. So I'll go to that and I'm gonna start here, just so you guys can see that all of the information that you're asking is here. So one of the questions was, how often do you have to test if you have an approved exception? So down here, we have the schedule. So you have to test 72 hours prior to your first time on campus, and then you have to test weekly. We have links here that show you where you can go to be tested. You have to be tested within the county. If for some reason you need to use an alternate site, then you have to email Public Health in Montgomery College to request that approval. But we encourage and require, unless it's completely unavoidable, that you're using a county site. All right, so once that link is there and you click on it, it's gonna look like this. So it's gonna look like you're logging into your MyMC, but then it's gonna take you to the actual portal. Uh-oh. Let me go back and try that again. So this is what, if you log directly into your MyMC, then it will take you to that page, which is not what you want. So you need to be using the actual link, which I thought I had here, but give me a second and I'll pull it up. Sorry, guys. Oh, there it is. I don't know what happened. That was weird. So this is what it's going to look like when you guys log in. So if you are fully vaccinated, you're going to follow these 4 steps. If you're requesting an exception, you're going to follow these 2 steps, which I'm sorry to advise you are actually more than 2 steps, but it looks like 2 here. So let's start with if you're fully vaccinated. So if you're fully vaccinated, you're going to complete this form. And so it's this first one. Some of this stuff will automatically populate. We are asking that you add in the contact information because we want to make sure we have what's the most recent, because we know sometimes students don't update their phone numbers in the student record. Then as you go through, you're going to be selecting. So this will be edited a little bit here because, as you know, we're now accepting some WHO vaccination, the WHO approved vaccinations. This was created before, but you'll go through and just select your responses to these questions. So like this one, for example, if you say no, if you're not fully vaccinated, then you're going to be referred to the forms, because then you would be doing an exception request. The other thing we're asking you to acknowledge is that you understand that this procedure, this policy is enforceable under the Student Code of Conduct. So if you submit false information, or if you don't abide by, like, for example, you haven't submitted your exception request, you haven't submitted proof of full vaccination, but you're coming to campus and participating in things, that again, this process is all enforceable under the Student Code of Conduct. We don't expect to really have a large number of students in that situation, but we do want you to be aware. The other step here is giving authorization for us to communicate with the Chesapeake Regional Information System, which we refer to as CRISP. So this is another third-party vendor, but what this does is give us access to people who have been tested or vaccinated in the state. And so this allows us to, even though you're going to be uploading that information, it allows us to get like official records. And so where I find this to be the most useful for students is if you have an exception and you're being tested and you forget to upload your proof of test and you come in as non-compliant, we can see from this record if you were tested. So we expect there's going to be some mistakes. So we will notify you that you're not in compliance, but this gives us another way to check that information. So it's just being mindful of that. And so we're listing here what this authorization means so that you understand what you're agreeing to. And if you don't agree to it, it's not going to prevent you from enrolling. It's not going to prevent you from participating in in-person activities. This is just an extra layer for the college to help keep everyone healthy and safe. So then you'll just sign and then you submit the form. So then the next step would be your immunizations, because again, this is for the fully vaccinated students. So when you go to the immunizations, it's being very slow now. It takes you to the page and it drops down and tells you, like, put your dates in. So we did have these additional vaccinations added here. So if you fall into that category, you're still covered. So you're just going to go in and you're going to put your dates and what you got and then submit. And then the next step is to upload. So I know it's 3 steps, but it's important because we need all of it for you to be in compliance. So then you're going to upload the pictures of your vaccination cards and then submit, and then you're good at that point. You're just waiting for it, the status for it to be processed. Now, if you are requesting an exception, which again, we're only accepting medical or religious, so not personal beliefs, it has to fall into those one of those 2 categories, then you'll go back to the forms and you'll submit the one that is appropriate for you. So the religious exception form starts off the same as the previous form, where some of the stuff is automatically populated. Again, asking you for that information. The difference here is we're asking you to submit a narrative to support your religious belief request. Then as you scroll down, there's some more questions about your history of getting vaccinations. And it finishes with the same thing, the authorization. And so like I said previously, this is where I see this CRISP information being very valuable, is if you're a student that's testing. It helps us just track things. So you do, no matter which form you complete, you're going to give us this authorization, or you're not, but you're going to be asked to give it. Then you submit. So the final form would be medical, and this is the one that is a little bit more tricky. So for this one, because you need to have a licensed medical provider complete this form with you, you have to print it, have it completed. There's a section for the student, there's a section for the medical provider. So you would go through, fill out the information that's needed, sign everything, and then you have to upload it back into this system. So the same place where that upload was, where you were going to take a picture of your vaccination card if you're fully vaccinated, that's where students who are requesting medical exceptions would upload this document. So it's a little more work, but it's because we do need that third-party signature on this one. So that's the steps for those. The same thing with that is if you have requested the exceptions, you're just going to wait the 5 days. So if you're in this system and you're having trouble like getting something to work, like I was just having those delays and stuff, so they work themselves out. But if you do run into trouble where you can't upload something or something's just not working right, you're going to email this email address here. So then there's also this link that takes you back so that you can see what are requirements in Montgomery College. The third possibility would be you can't log in. So, and that, I mean, that first page that looks like your MyMC login. So the possibility would be that you are having difficulty logging in. So if that was the case, then one, be mindful, did you register within the last 24 hours? If so, give it a little time and try again later. If not, then that's the IT help desk. So you would just call them and let them know your student MyMC information is not working for the MediCap portal. So we went over, I think, all of the questions that are on there. And again, if you guys have questions, just jot them down and I can respond to them at the end. I think that's it for those slides. So let me stop sharing. Everything was answered. The only thing would be the what type of test. And because we are requiring that you use a Montgomery County site, so the tests that are offered there are the ones that we are requiring. So if it's issued by a Montgomery County site, then it's accepted.
Rebecca, did you want to start off?
Why don't you start off and I'll finish up the end of them.
Sounds good. Okay. First question. So will the campuses be open? So yes, the campuses are open and will continue to be open. And the goal that was mentioned earlier is to increase our numbers where we were at 30%. And it's the goal overall is to increase till we get to the point that we're 100%. But the goal for the spring is certainly in the 70% percentile to get everyone back on campus. What facilities will be open? Most of the facilities will be open. There are a few areas that we are still working out the logistics and how things will look, and that includes both the pool and gym time areas, still working out just sort of logistics, but the goal is to have everything open so that you're able to utilize all of those spaces. Will I have to wear a mask? Yes, we've decided overall as a college that we will continue to maintain wearing masks throughout inside of all of the buildings. Some of you may have heard, of course, recently in the news that there is a new variant called the Omicron variant, which of course is, they're still working out the overall characteristics of this particular COVID variant. But one thing that they know for sure is that it's easily transmissible. And because of that, and certainly because we don't know the whole entire number of where our entire college population is regarding vaccination, we're going to continue on for the near future, especially as we go into the spring, where we will maintain masks inside of all of the college buildings. One thing to consider and think about is all of our campuses have amazing outside spaces. So if you need to take a break, to take a break outside and really take advantage of taking your mask off in open areas where there's not much space at all. What additional safety guidelines will there be? For anyone that hasn't been on campus, something that you should know is that all of the buildings have signage that's up letting you know about the requirement of wearing masks inside. All of the floors have hand sanitizer on all floors, as well as cloth, both sanitizer as well as other materials that are there that you can use outside all of your rooms that you'll be utilizing throughout the buildings. They'll have that available for anyone to use. Will the college limit the number of people on campus? No, the goal is really to get more people on campus, but we certainly with that want to make sure that we are, whenever possible, taking advantage of social distancing. So trying to keep distance where possible. In classrooms, you may notice that the rooms themselves, the chairs may have been moved around so that we can take advantage of all the space within the rooms. And certainly some of the professors will ask that students are every other seat, or there's distance between tables, things like that. Those are just precautions that are being taken. But of course, keep in mind, there are other preventive measures that we're using. So we are using the mask. We are recognizing the importance of hand sanitizing and hand washing, and of course, the social distance. Another thing to keep in mind as well is if you are not feeling well, to stay at home, and certainly make sure that you're keeping in contact with your professor to let them know what's going on, to let them know that you're not feeling well. And this is the time that we are, asking everyone to certainly use their graces and courtesies overall, understanding that it's an interesting, unexpected time for everyone, and we just want to make sure that everyone in the Raptor community continues to stay safe. Will college sports take place? They most certainly will, and just want to add that they have continued on, and we've been successful both in a number of sports that have been taking place on the campuses. So it most certainly will continue. Can student groups meet in person? Right now, we are recommending continuing on with Zoom for meetings, but we certainly understand that everyone would like to get together in person. And as we go into the spring, certainly looking at opportunities to meet outside may be something to consider. But right now, we're moving forward with meeting meeting on Zoom and other ways like that instead.
I think Chevelle covered it all. We're excited to have everybody back, and we're excited to see more student energy and more students back on campus in spring.
And I will just add, in terms of what's being done on campuses in terms of safety, water fountains have been turned off. And so there are water stations in almost all buildings, not quite, but bottled water, using filling stations will still be the plan in the spring, I believe. So what types of classes are available? I'm going to approach that in a couple of ways in terms of the classes required to complete programs, to complete degrees. The full set of courses is being offered, and they are being offered, oops. You go back to I'll pull up those questions. So basically, almost all courses that you see listed in the catalog, classes that are required for our programs, will be offered. In terms of how they are offered, we really have three basic types. Prior to the pandemic, we had a rich source of distance learning classes, and those were the campus. Some of you who took classes before the pandemic would be familiar with D being a campus designator for distance learning. Those were asynchronous. They still are asynchronous. So you interact with the course as your schedule, as your time permits. The instructor in that course, the faculty member, will let you know when there are office hours, how to interact with the faculty member, that sort of thing. When we went to remote operations, structured remote classes were introduced, and those are synchronous. In other words, they met and they still meet at specified times and days, just like a face-to-face class, but in a virtual environment. And then, of course, we have the face-to-face classes. As Dr. Long pointed out, we've always had some throughout the pandemic. We had sometimes very small number of classes on campus, a few more this fall, and certainly looking at about 70% of what is in the schedule for spring is on campus, face-to-face. Dr. Kelly, do you want to jump in? Is there anything that you feel I've left out of in terms of answering the first two questions?
Yeah, so just to follow up, we've always had hybrid classes available. We have just started to expand significantly the spaces on campus that can accommodate them. And a hybrid class, there's a lot of flexibility that the individual faculty member will have with how many course meetings in person versus how many course meetings online, or whether they will do both simultaneously, right? You can be either online at the same time, or you can be in person at the same time. And so one of the issues that we continue to deal with and are systematically addressing is making more classrooms available for hybrid. Thanks, Margaret.
Sure. And then what happens if I can't finish my degree due to vaccination status? Again, this is going to be an individual conversation, and we hope that there are few students. If you can complete the course online, not having to come to campus, that will be one opportunity to do that. But certainly any student in that situation should be reaching out to their program advisor to see what the alternatives are for taking a class that appears to be only offered in a face-to-face environment. And where that could become an issue, and Dr. Thomas can address this, is lab classes that we consider high touch, where that we consider it very important that the student be in a somewhat unique space. And this might be our automotive technology program. You could be a biological sciences major, a cybersecurity major, but programs where we have unique and really quite fantastic spaces in many cases. And we just feel that the experience that a student gets in those spaces is really critical as they move through the degree requirements.
And just to follow up on VPP Latimer's comments, it should not be the case that you should not be able to finish your degree. I think that most of the time we're talking about the required lab, right, that VPP Latimer was referring to. As we all know, there are alternatives to being in person for some labs or some options, for example, geology, for example, astronomy. So it just requires that you get with that program advisor and find those options that work for you in the event you need a medical or a religious exception to the vaccine.
Exactly. And if you have that exception, then you could come to campus. So that if the question is really a student's inability to come to campus, and that might be a particular health issue where the student is making that decision, again, we want you to complete your degree. We want you to finish your program of study. And someone at the college will do everything and anything possible to help you figure out an efficient, effective, and we hope really great way for you to do that. We are truly not trying to put up roadblocks. We are trying to let people move through their programs of study in a healthy, safe, efficacious manner.
Yeah, and Margaret, that's a great point. If you have an exception that has been affirmed, you are welcome to come to campus. You must follow the protocol for testing and of course wear a mask. So yeah, that's a very good distinction. This would be more of a case where a student says, I don't want to, and there's no official exception that student has been granted. So those are different scenario possibilities in answer to this question.
Right. And then the last question, I can start this, and again, Dr. Kelly and I can tag team on these. Will there be any special in-class guidelines or requirements? And that will really be up to a faculty member. The mask mandate is going to be in place in all classes. Someone alluded to, it might have been Chevelle, that you may find classes set up in a particular way. If a class is not fully enrolled, and in some cases we have capped classes to have fewer students in the class. So rather than 24 students, you might find that there are 16 students, and there might be chairs removed or sort of pulled to the back and stacked so that the remaining chairs can be spread out more. Some of you, again, if you were taking classes before the pandemic and in classrooms, you may have had a faculty member you loved who did a lot of group work and had you pull your chairs together and working in teams of 2 or 3 or 4. You may find that there's very little of that going on, that there's more a sort of traditional setup in the classroom. Dr. Thomas can talk about some of the things that may be going on in labs. Again, those specialized spaces where, often we might want students sort of huddled and looking at something, talking about something, and you're going to be asked to keep that little bit of distance and take turns maybe as opposed to having everybody have sort of hands-on. So I think you'll find that your faculty member will be very clear, give very explicit instructions about the kinds of accommodations that are being made because of the pandemic.
Yeah, I'm happy to just add in there, in a lot of our lab classes, there are lab specific things that we're doing where, For example, there may be common equipment that everybody in that lab needs to use. So making sure that that equipment is cleaned regularly in between students, and the faculty in all of those spaces have really done good jobs thinking through the details of how to set up those labs to be as safe as possible in those specific circumstances.
Right, and just adding to that, someone mentioned earlier, I know it was Chevelle Glimpf, that there are stations where you can use hand sanitizer. There are wipes in various locations. There are even extra masks if you forget yours at every safety and security location, and possibly in department offices as well. So just keep in mind that you can self-address issues of sanitation between using keyboards when you're in class, if you touch things. Just, feel free to do as much as you can. And then, as Rebecca mentioned, faculty are very thoughtful about that. In fact, in the fall, when we first came back, several faculty I know were going outdoors and having their class outside, just to reduce everybody's concerns and to create a situation with the most ventilation possible. So there will be potentially several interesting as well as unique approaches, but most of it's about giving people enough room, making sure things are clean between use, and then having students be responsible for either cleaning the equipment before and after their use, and then being aware that they need to remain in their mask and use hand sanitizer or wipes regularly.
So a couple of things regarding reporting protocol. So what happens if a student gets COVID? Is if anyone actually gets if a student or if an employee gets COVID, the first thing we certainly do is ask that if you will contact public health at montgomerycollege.edu, you will someone on our team will actually reach out to you, ask you a number of questions, specifically, when was the last time that you were in campus? When were you tested? When were your overall symptoms? And when we ask the questions about sort of where were you when you were on campus, is to alert and make sure that others were aware. And if we need to do any sort of deep cleaning for a particular class because you have been in that class within the last sort of 24 to 72 hours, then that's the reason for asking those specific questions. And so once that happens, what we ask, of course, that if you've tested positive, we ask you about who your professor is so that we can reach out to make sure that they are aware for information purposes. That information goes out to the entire college so that everyone is aware of a situation. And just it's more for awareness, and we don't provide any identifiers for the individual, but we certainly make note of whatever building an individual was in. What happens if there's an infection in my class? If there's a known infection that's in the class, there's a couple of situations that occur. Usually, I can say that most of the cases that we have, the person that has become positive for COVID, that's usually an outside situation and they haven't been on campus recently. So there hasn't been a need for a lot of the classes to go remote. However, if there is a need for that, you will hear from your professor who has all the information for the students in the class. They'll let you know that there has been a recent situation that's occurred, and they'll provide you guidance about next steps regarding being remote for during the period of time that you would need to stay remote. If for some reason, if anyone feels, if they are in a class and they feel at any time that they may have been exposed to someone that has tested positive, it's usually recommended that someone gets tested 3 to 5 days after their exposure. The way the situation works right now is if someone tests positive for COVID, the actual county reaches out to those individuals and goes into very specific details about their exposures, who they were exposed to, how long ago, getting a general idea, and then the county will reach out to those specific individuals. We, of course, will follow up and provide any necessary information to the county as they need it, and certainly will provide additional support and guidance to the employee or to our students if they need that as well. There's an infection in my class. Who do I report to if I suspect myself or another student has been exposed? As I mentioned, if you suspect that you have been exposed, you can certainly reach out to public health at montgomerycollege.edu. You can certainly reach out to your professor as well, who will then reach out to us in public health to let us know. Then we'll follow back up with whoever that person is. We really, if you believe someone is positive, it's really, we're asking for that individual to let us know. But certainly if there's someone that you know that is positive, certainly you could encourage them as well to make sure that they are reaching out to public health so that we're all aware about that particular individual. But we will ask that the individual that is positive, that student will be the one, or that employee will be the one that will reach out to us and let us know that they are positive. Will all campuses follow the same guidelines? Yes, and actually we've been very successful with all of the campuses actually following the guidelines regarding reporting of individuals that have been exposed, reporting of those that have tested positive, and that we've had a pretty, the process has maintained throughout the entire time. But if there's ever a question that you have, whether or not it is, early in the morning or certainly in the evening at any time, you can always reach out to public health at montgomerycollege.edu. Another option is public safety at montgomerycollege.edu, and they will direct us to that question specifically to public health, and we'll answer that question. And then of course, if there's any questions that you have, you can actually get additional information, and you see the website that that is right below the link. Any information or any questions that you have, they can certainly be answered there. I did want to just sort of a couple of things that I mentioned earlier about public health prevention. And I mentioned, of course, about staying home if you're sick. I mentioned about hand washing and hand sanitizer, hand wipes that are available, social distance whenever that's possible. But of course, still, it's important as well to get vaccinated if possible. And then the other thing, of course, is making sure that you're taking in a daily health assessment. That's something that we ask for everyone that is both a student, an employee, or a visitor to any of our campuses, to make sure that you are taking the daily health assessment. It helps, and it's designed to pause if there's any unusual, symptoms that you may have, for you to be able to pause and sort of say, hey, I'm not feeling well, and this is the opportunity for me to not come to campus. So that's what the daily health assessment is designed for. If you're someone certainly that has ongoing seasonal allergies and things like that, it's not designed for you to take that and to incorporate that into the health assessment. It's really designed for those unusual and unique symptoms that you do not have an ongoing basis that you recognize that you may have. And so that's the overall goal of the health assessment. And if you can get into the habit of making sure that you take it daily, in addition to following the other measures, that's really the goal for us to, if you maintain that, the goal is that we will be able to all be back on campuses and hopefully at some point be 100% on campus.
I know Chevelle cleared it up, but just in case someone didn't read the chat, student groups are allowed to gather on campus. So if and I know a lot of these students are in groups, so I don't want you to leave here confused. We do encourage that you use Zoom meetings when possible, just to limit the groups gathering. But I know there are some meetings, there's some businesses you guys are handling that's more efficient in person. So just to be clear, you are permitted as student groups to gather on campus, but you need to wear your mask, social distance when you can, all those great things, and Zoom if that's an option as well.
Any participants, you guys can unmute yourself and ask questions if you guys want to. It's completely fine.
I actually have a question myself. I've been made aware by my professors and everything that if there were to be a circumstance where you're diagnosed with COVID, you are free to skip an, I guess, like obviously not be there for the exam. But I don't understand why we're being penalized for it, because I know professors have told me like, oh, you haven't taken this exam, you had COVID. That's fine. It'll be a 0. It'll just be dropped towards the end of the semester. And I don't know why we're being penalized for something that we basically can't control. I understand if there's like you just skipped the exam because you didn't feel like going, but if we've been like, we have a whole, like we have proof that we have COVID, obviously we can't come to school. how come we're being penalized for it? Like, why can't we have an opportunity to retake the exam another time?
I think it's important in those kinds of cases to sit down and have a meeting with the professor and make sure, everybody is on the same page about what's going on there. It is an excellent question. Sometimes I'm finding during COVID, lots of miscommunications and misunderstandings going on, and so just having that conversation, going to your professor's office hours, asking for clarification about the policy and asking questions. As a student, you have a right to ask questions and understand why course policies are what they are. And if you feel like something is unclear or something is being done that is unfair, and you have that meeting with the professor and you still feel like you don't have clear resolution there, you can always then go to the department chair. Sometimes that department chair can act as a mediator in those situations and sit down and really help facilitate conversation there about what's going on. Sometimes in cases like this, I know one of the things that professors have done to kind of help with the fact that lots of people are sick and lots of people are missing exams is it's not a penalty, but what they're setting up their course so that everybody gets some free misses, like, hey, you missed this exam. Great. That's not going to hurt your grade because everybody is automatically going to get some quizzes or some exams dropped at the end of the semester. So I know that's one way to kind of manage the complicated times that we have, but definitely as a student, you deserve a clear answer on those things. And if you don't get that from your professor, reach out to the department chair who can help out there. Definitely.
Thank you. And I was just going to say, I just, at least for my science classes so far, I thought this was a policy because I know there's the same consistency of my professors saying the exact same thing for my science classes, not for like any of my other subjects I've been taking, but for my science class specifically. They had this whole rule of if you have COVID, like you can't obviously come to school and it would be dropped. But I do, like, for example, there would be an instance where I'll use myself as an example. I've been studying day and night for this exam. I know the content very well, and I end up missing this exam. But there's a previous exam where I did not very well on that I was intending to drop that one. So I am using that skip or that drop on an exam that I was prepared for. But again, like something that came out of the blue, I got COVID, and that kind of like messed. And I thought like this, from like my professors, I thought this was a a science department implemented thing, but apparently it isn't. So I do have to, I guess, check that out.
And I think totally this is a good case to go and reach out to that department chair and just seek some clarification about what the situation is there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And I would just add, Nikki, and Rebecca's alluded to this, this is a faculty member's prerogative. But these are the kinds of things that usually are specified in a syllabus. Now, I will say that during COVID, I think some issues have probably come up that no one anticipated, and therefore were not included in a syllabus. But I would wholeheartedly support Dr. Thomas's recommendation that you reach out to the faculty member with that argument. Or the chair, talk to the chair if necessary.
Will do. Wonderful. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any more questions? You guys can drop it in the chat, or like I said, you guys can raise your hand and speak up. This is a comfortable space where you guys can ask any type of question, so please do.
Hi, Kath. Thank you for the reminder. My name is Senator Sarah Ayiti-Atai. I'm a senator at large on the Takoma Park campus. And I have a question. I wanted to know how would the vaccination mandate, the vaccine mandate be enforced? For example, we want students to go online and upload the vaccination card. What if they don't? Maybe the professor knows it. The professor knows that the student doesn't have it, but can they ask the student to leave the class? If the student doesn't want to leave the class, what's the dynamic there? How is this going to work?
Sure, that's a great question. I was expecting it, so I'm glad you asked it. So professors are not going to be asking students to leave classes based on the vaccination mandate. What happens is the two systems talk to each other. So when the information is updated in the Medicat portal, it syncs back over to Banner and it tells us the student is compliant. If it syncs back over and the student hasn't done what they're supposed to do, it tells us they're not compliant. So, and when I say us, it's a small group of people, you know, just a small group at the college. It's not all the professors, everybody, it's just a small group that can see this information. So when we see that, we'll send the student will get a notification from Medicat saying you're not compliant. Then you will get something from Montgomery College, you know, a formal letter letting you know you're not compliant and that you have 72 hours to do what you need to do to be compliant. And if you don't do that, then you're at risk of being dropped from your classes. So it's sort of like other situations where you might be dropped from a class for not meeting different criteria, but it's not going to be you show up in class and your professor says you have to leave. Like we're not gonna do that to you. And the hope is that by giving the 72 hours, that gives us a chance to figure out what's going on with the student, because we expect that most of the situations where a student falls out of compliance is it's going to be more of you didn't have a chance to go get your testing, or you didn't realize you missed one of the 3 steps in uploading your documentation. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I also do have another question, because I know some people, some of my friends and myself are student assistant, and we had to upload our vaccination status on, I think it was on the 8th. So do we have to do it again as a student, or it's just going to transfer to Banner? Or
So I don't want to give you a wrong answer to that. I know we have discussed that we were not going to make students who had already done it do it again, but I'm not positive that we found a workaround since it is in Medicat. But I can find out more about that, and we will communicate that out once everything's up and going. We'll be able to communicate if you're a student assistant or if you've submitted this on the employee side, you do or don't need to. I know we didn't want to make students do it twice, but I'm not positive we found a solution to make them talk to each other.
okay.
I have a 2-part question. One is similar to Sarah's. I'm a nursing student, and we did have to submit our COVID vaccination status and everything through Castle Branch. So my first question is, will there be a system where that integrates into this newer system as well? Or do we have to do it on both platforms?
So
My-
it's the
Oh,
same
go ahead.
answer for that one. For that first part is I have to figure it out. I'm not sure that we have a way of syncing that information across the board.
Okay. And then my next question is, I also work, I'm a nurse as well as a student. And we do have occasions where we have primary exposure where we are put on remote work by occupational health for work. So how does that come into play if we're asymptomatic, but we've been asked to quarantine until our results come through, or whatever the case from work? I've had it happen over last semester where I had to quarantine because of exposure. I had no symptoms, and I was able to do alternate assignments, but at the same time, those alternate assignments were more work than coming to class. And it feels like a punishment for being honest.
So great, I think those are great questions. The first part is, if you are fully vaccinated, there is not a quarantine period for if you're fully vaccinated and you have no symptoms. However, we recommend that you go ahead and get tested 3 to 5 days after an exposure, which sounds like that's what you're going to be doing for work as well. But you can, that's why the daily health assessment is important, that if you don't have symptoms and if you and everything else is fine, you can certainly proceed forward with your classes. I can't speak to the overall protocol with where you work, but as it relates to the college, we've been following the guidelines provided from the county and from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, where if you are fully vaccinated, there's no need for a quarantine period. However, it's recommended in case you end up being one of those, it's a breakthrough case, that you get tested 3 to 5 days after the exposure.
Okay, so even if just so I make sure I understand you. So even if I've been asked to quarantine by my job, I'm still able to come to class as long as I have no symptoms.
Correct.
Thank you.
I think sometimes when we get into really doing these things and implementing them, questions will come up. And I would just encourage you all to ask those questions if they're not coming to mind today, or you don't know to ask them because you haven't tried to do something or a situation hasn't arisen. This is not your only opportunity to ask a question. So reach out to your faculty, a chair, any of us here who are on this. The directors of Student Life know who we are and where to find us.
It was mentioned that some professors maybe are prepared for classes just in case they need to go remote. And some classes are prepared to teach simultaneously, remotely and in session classes at the exact same time. Is this something that only certain professors are doing, or is it something that all professors would be able to do in accordance to, I guess, majors and whatever?
Andre, I'll just start off for my colleagues and then we can all chime in. The hybrid approach, which means that they can do it same time in person and online, requires specialized equipment. And not every classroom has specialized equipment. If anything, maybe a fraction, let's say a quarter of our classrooms across the 3 campuses have the specialized equipment. So the faculty who are doing it are those who have set up the course to be hybrid and have access to a room where they can deliver it in the hybrid mode. So that's where we're investing in the technology to expand that capability for our faculty. But right now it's going to be a small number. It's going to be it's pretty popular, for example, with education, paralegal, but there are not significant number of faculty at this time who have access to the technology in the classroom to be able to deliver their class in that manner. Does that answer your question, Andre?
Yes, thank you.
I do suggest people to ask questions. It's unlikely that we will get another opportunity to ask and talk directly with the panelist members from MC administration. Like Miss, you did say that we have the opportunity to email, but it's a little bit different because you're talking one-on-one with the teacher. So I do suggest students to grasp this opportunity to ask panelist members questions they have.
So if not all the classes are going to be completely hybrid because Montgomery College is in the implementation of resources enough for each classroom. In the case that, let's say myself, I got positive, I tested positive for COVID-19 and my class is not hybrid. Of course, I will notify my professor, but we all know that we're not sure how long the symptoms are going to be present. So how does this going to be affecting my academic progress and how I can keep up with my classes? And what is the best approach here to continue with my classes and not see myself affected?
I will jump in for this one because we've already had cases like this in some of our classes that have been back on campus. And what I can tell you is faculty members are very willing to work with students and kind of help you keep up with that work, help you stay on track in those kinds of situations. So again, Chevelle Glimpf can jump in and tell you that there is a required kind of quarantine period. And then once you're past that quarantine period, you can come back to class. And in that intervening time, your faculty members will work with you to make sure that you stay up with the coursework.
And just thanks for that. And just a quick, just so that everyone's aware. So if you or someone, whether or not it's a breakthrough case or you or someone that is not vaccinated and you become positive for COVID, there is a quarantine period that happens once you become positive. It's a 10-day quarantine period if you are vaccinated, fully vaccinated. if you are someone that's getting, starting in January, that has a medical or religious exception and you're not vaccinated, there's a 14-day quarantine period that occurs. And then once that's over with, what is required is that you either have a medical clearance from your doctor that says that you are good to go to return to your in-person classes, or that you have also tested negative and you've received a negative test result. Some doctors' offices are not doing the negative, are not doing the testing after you've tested positive so quickly, because sometimes there's a likelihood that you may test positive again or have a very strong likelihood of a false positive that may be present. So that's the reason for having a clearance from your doctor's office that says this person has finished their 10 day if you are vaccinated, and your 14-day, and they are cleared to return to their in-person classes. Once I get that information through public health at montgomerycollege.edu, because remember, that person would have reached out to me at the very beginning to say that they have COVID. Once I receive that information 10 days later or 14 days later, then you are good to go. So you would be able to go back to your classes on your 11th day and your 15th day, not your 14th day. Your quarantine period is the 14 days.
Thank you. One more question. So if the individual tested positive, they need permission from the doctor to, like, approve for Montgomery College to be back to campus. What if the student doesn't have medical insurance?
So if that's the case, then I would ask that you can reach out to public health, and we can sort of work with trying to. I've had situations that has occurred, and I've worked with working with them with one of the clinics or something else in the area that they can get that one of the free clinics or something in the area for that. So that's we've worked at a number of different ways to make sure that you're getting what you need. And it's not a situation that you are in a situation where you cannot return. We want everyone to return, but we want them to return safely. So I'll do whatever we can to connect you with providers in the area that can provide you the services that you need for that.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I actually have a question as well. So for an example, if I'm taking a physical class and for an example, I get COVID and I have to quarantine for 10 days and I have a test in like 2 days, what would I do in that type of situation?
Totally work with your professor. Go to your professor, and at this point, all the professors are getting used to operating in this kind of intermediate world we're in. So we've had this happen before, and professors are very accommodating, and in fact, this has kind of always happened. It's always been the case that people would get sick, right? And sometimes have to miss tests because you're sick. And instructors are using the same kinds of approaches they used before, but probably even being even more flexible now just because of the COVID situation. So talk to your professor. They'll work with you to figure out a solution that's reasonable, because again, it's not good if you're coming to campus when you're sick, potentially infecting other people, or if you're trying to do a bunch of work when your body needs to be resting and getting better. So your professors understand all this, and they will work with you in these situations. Totally.
And if I could just say, the key part is communicating. There have been a couple of situations that have happened where people have tried to do the best that they thought that they were doing, where they just stayed away, and they stayed away too long. And that causes problems when people don't know where you are or what's going on. It's really important that once you have gotten tested, that you don't, well, first of all, that you just don't automatically assume situations, that you really go and get tested. That's the reason why we've asked that you go through the county to get tested, because there's not a fee that's there. There's no charge. So we ask that you go and get tested. You get tested. That way you know for sure. And then it's important just to communicate what's going on to your professor. But there have been a couple of situations where people from this recent semester that they just haven't been around for weeks. And that's where there's a problem or there's an issue, because then the question is, well, where have you been? And why haven't we heard anything from you? And then the thing from the public health perspective is, well, I need something to show that you have, that you in fact have tested positive and that you've gotten medical clearance. So it's a snowball effect. And that's why it's just really, really important to communicate from the very beginning, just what's going on and whatever the situation is. It's really important to just communicate that situation, and nothing is a surprise. I mean, you know, there's been situations where there have been family members that have been sick. There have been students that have had to sort of work through that with family members and be there for them. And then of course they ended up testing positive themselves. So it's just important, if I could say it just over and over again, it's really important to communicate from the very beginning what's going on. No one is saying going into, you know, into specific details. That's where public health can certainly help and be involved in the process. So you don't have to share everything, but certainly providing as much information as possible so that your professor knows what's going on, so that they can help you and support you. And that it's true. The most important thing in all of this is that you are safe and that you're healthy. That's the priority over all of the things that are going on right now. That's the reason why I just sort of mentioned earlier about graces and courtesies, where, you know, it's a time, we get it. Everyone gets it. This is an unknown territory for all of us. And so that's why it's just important that if you can almost over communicate what's going on, so that no one is taken off guard when they don't see you in class. They see you on a Tuesday and then they don't see you again for 3 weeks. That's when there's sort of questions about, well, what's going on, and they want to help you, but they also want to be fair to the other students as well.
Can't say that loud enough, Chevelle, just underscoring that, you know, the minute you can, let your instructor know. And as she said, you don't have to provide details, but I'm sick, I'm not going to be in class today, not 3 weeks down the road. I've missed 3 weeks of class. What do I need to do to make up? If nothing else, it allows a faculty member to sort of know that you're not going to be there and be saving material, sort of have a folder for you, keep you up to date. So yeah, what Chevelle said, loud and clear.
Andre, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I had a quick question. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe the MC bus, buses are currently have become effective again currently. And I was wondering, in that regards, are the buses being, I guess, more effectively cleaned, and is there like a cap on how many students can actually take the bus between campuses, that of those students who need to take the bus to campus, between the campuses? Like, how's that all going, if possible?
Andre, this is Dr. Kelly again. What I do know is that there are special cleaning protocols for the shuttle. I also know that we actually have so few people on the shuttle right now that they're not limiting the number of students on the shuttle. But I think we need to check with the head of parking and the shuttle, Mark Pace, and then we can get back to you with the specifics, because I've asked the cleaning protocol question, but we haven't had enough students using the shuttles to get into limiting the number of students on them. But that's a great question, because it'll be a different situation in the spring. So thanks for asking that one.
Can I make one comment, maybe a last comment about scheduling and the nature and how courses are being offered, which I hope will be clarifying. I know that when you go to register for classes, there's a lot of information. It's kind of dense and it generates a lot of questions, I think, especially the first time students register. For instance, if you're taking a distance class that is asynchronous, the time is listed as TBD. And we've all interacted with students who have said, well, I didn't register for that class because I was waiting to hear what the time was. With distance classes, there will never be a time listed. With a remote class, a time is listed. Those are the synchronous classes. But what I really wanted to address is what we are calling hybrid classes and high flex classes. And those words are sometimes being used interchangeably. So the first point really is it's important to read section notes. When you register for a class, if there are section notes under that line across the computer screen, make sure you pay attention to what that is telling you. A hybrid class might be a class that is formatted such that you come to campus one day a week and the other hours of instruction are remote, and they might be synchronous or asynchronous. You might only come 2 or 3 times during the entire semester. That can be listed as a hybrid class. Hybrid, and now we're using the word high flex, is when the space, the instructional space, the lab, the classroom is equipped with cameras, microphones, that sort of audio visual technology to allow an instructor to teach in the class face-to-face with some students while broadcasting in real time to students who are remote. This is relatively new. Dr. Kelly alluded to the fact that the education program is using hybrid and high flex classes, and so is the paralegal program. And that's that idea of, gee, I'm taking the class while I'm sitting at home, or maybe at my desk at lunch at work, somebody else is actually in the space with the instructor. So just be aware that as we hit upon the words that actually describe new formats, taking advantage of new technology and new ideas about pedagogy, it's important that you read. And I know sometimes it seems tedious to have to pay attention to all of those details, but it'll really help you figure out what you are registering for, what the format of the class will be. And I didn't want to turn this into a scheduling meeting. I can turn everything into a scheduling meeting, and that's not my goal. But it's such a big part of getting through your program of study is making sure that you identify, register for the correct classes, and that you have a schedule that works for you. Our goal always is to have the right courses at the right time in the right format for the right students. And we work very hard to make that happen. And sometimes we're closer to that ideal than other times, but it's a moving target because of technology and the capabilities that we are expanding. Thank you for letting me say that.
No problem, Ms. Margaret. So is there any more panelist members that have anything to say, any notes, or just from the students, any questions?
Hi everyone, my name is Abby. I'm a student senator at large at the Germantown campus. And I don't have a question, but as an early college student who has been on campus this entire semester, I just like to note that while you see this talk on a presentation and you're being given this information by panelists, I want you to know that what they're saying is true and it is actually manifesting on campus. As someone who has been on, I can tell you that hand sanitizers are on every floor, as previously mentioned. Those wipes, they're available in almost every classroom. And students are working with their professors, and professors are being very kind and lenient during these times. And the camaraderie you see on campus is kind of actually very amazing, because students, without it being necessary, they know that if they need to take their mask off and take a sip of water, everyone steps outside and takes that drink. And they do their best to space themselves out in classrooms on their own without the professor needing to say anything. So when you come back to campus in the spring, just know that you can feel safe and you should feel free to ask questions, because our panelists and their teams really listen to you and you are a priority. And so we have seen that as students on campus, and I just want to let everyone know that what you're seeing here, this actually manifests.
Rebecca, you have your hand raised. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Adigay, and I'm the Student Council Chair. And this is me officially inviting you all to our Student Council meeting. Our last Student Council meeting of the year would be December 6th. So all are welcome to attend. And for all students, the Student Council is the right channel to bring your student concerns. If you have any student concerns or academic concerns, you're welcome to come to the student council meeting and just tell us what the problem is, and we would move it on to the college council. So yeah, everybody, you're welcome to attend. And if you need the Zoom link, please send me an email. I'll put it in the chat and I'm going to send that to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Is there anything else from the panelist members, from the students?
I'm just gonna remind everyone that the portal goes live tomorrow. So as soon as you can get your stuff in, get it in if you're registered for spring.
Like I said, I just want to reiterate, this is not the only opportunity. I'm going to link an FAQ page from the Montgomery College website. Giovanni will put that in the chat. You guys can go over there if you have any questions, and even if you have further questions that are not answered by the FAQ website, you can go to publichealth@montgomerycollege.edu, which also Giovanni will link in the chat. And yeah, this is not the only opportunity, and you guys can always answer questions. So yeah, I just want to thank the panelist members for being here and taking the time out of their busy schedules to talk to every single one of us, and all the students for being able to make it. Yeah, it is very exciting. I do hope I see everyone back on physical in the spring 2022 semester. So yeah, thank you everyone for being able to make it.